I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, December the 5th. Kind of had a blast from the past here is going over the markets from Wednesday. You're nearby past in that your board started failing this here middle of the week. We haven't really seen that much this fall. We've had a real supportive board and it either didn't do much or it kind of slowly gained ground. Didn't have these big swings, but as I mentioned on yesterday's report, your commodity people are wanting to see some more volatility in this. They're reading the charts. They all read them the same, and if they all start going in one direction, and that's the way the board's going to go. And everybody was kind of feeling like it was time for the board to step back a little bit. Sure enough, middle of the week it did. Kind of played right into your Packers' hand, as they really didn't want to have to give up any more money, but already got steady bids. So they may end up having to do that too, unless the board continues to plunge here later in the week. The main blast from the past that I was talking about, though, was on your feeder cattle futures. You remember for years and years, $1.50 was the limit, daily limit move. And it just so noticed whenever I looked at the close there, your feeder cattle futures, the first 2 months were both down $1.50, and it kind of just gave a blast from the past, as you used to think, whoa, $1.50, that's a big move. But now we've got it, $3, $4.50. $1.50 is not much at all. But let's look at the board for Wednesday, December. Live cattle down $1.10 at 119.45. So we're getting close to option on the basis there. So I know our weighted average wasn't nearly that much last week, but we did have quite a bit of 120 and mostly 119, so we wouldn't be too far from that now. February down $1.45 at 124.17. January feeder cattle, like I said earlier, down $1.50 at 140.87. Now we're starting to see a big disparage between what our nearby feeder cattle futures quotes are and what the cash market is, and we feel like we've lost a lot of ground in our cash market from all the pressure due to the large amounts of calves that have been coming to town, and heavy calves. But our closest feeder board is for January, and that's not too awful far away, sitting below 141. March was down $1.50, and it's at a premium to January at 141.42. Fat cattle trade didn't really take off yet Wednesday, but we had some signs that we can probably get steady. And you look at, there was no voluntary report. If you guys are used to looking at USDA market reports, and I know most of you aren't, that's why you watch things like this, because you can get the same information and it's a whole lot easier to get. But I've looked at them all my life, and we don't even get voluntary fed cattle direct market reports anymore. Half the time they forget to put them out. It's just a skeleton report in that everything's there. They just plug in the date, they plug in the futures and the box beef and a few things that they put on there, and they never really change it, and they hardly ever get anything quoted on there. But didn't even put one out for Wednesday. But talking to people around the circuit and everything, they had call-in bids first thing Wednesday morning. Call-in bids at Steady Money. So you remember Steady Money, so that was 118, 119, something like that. And they could get that. I'm not sure if they could have got that late in the day after the board closed so much lower. But early Wednesday morning, before the board opened, call-in bids at Steady, and not too many people taking them. Iowa had a load of cattle at 118. Nebraska had a few cattle at 118. Kansas just a few, 119, 19 and a half. Texas and Colorado both did not report anything, and nothing came through, nothing printed due to confidentiality. Now we're used to that on Colorado. Now we're starting to get used to it on Texas, and it's not much fun. But nothing to report from those due to confidentiality, and they've got what they call a 370-20 rule. And basically that 370-20 rules is in a certain area you've got to have at least 3 players in there to report. One of them can't do more than 70% of the business, and they can't have the only quotes there for more than 20% of the time. So that's pretty close to your 370-20 rule. It gets a lot more complicated than that, but when you hear people talk about it, that's why it's there, just to not divulge too much information from a lone player there. Box beef cutout values tanked, and that had a lot to do with the board. Now, if you can explain to me how box beef cutout value, after the cattle are already dressed and cut up and everything and ready to move down the line toward your wholesalers into your retail market, how that market going down can kill your cattle market now. You'd think it'd be the other way around or vice versa, but that really pressured your board a little bit, because the Packers have been keeping all that money in between there. There's a lot of gravy in there. It's not like what they're getting for cutout values. If you subtract the cost of slaughter and the cost of fabrication and everything, and then you get back, you're going to come up exactly what fat cattle are. No, they've got huge margins in there, so really shouldn't have a connect at all. But choice cuts on Wednesday afternoon, $226.95, down $3.20. I'm telling you what, they really tanked it. They've already done all their holiday buying and everything. Now where we're kind of looking at down the road from where they purchased that is right in the middle of your Christmas holiday. So that's how come things are so weak right now on your box beef cutouts. Your choice cuts on Wednesday afternoon, $210.31, down $2 even. They really shrunk that choice select spread that was way up there over $25, now $16.64 as far as Wednesday's close anymore. Slaughter, pretty good. We're getting up there pretty good. Of course, we've got Holcomb back online, but at a just a small amount of what they normally would do, or what they were doing back before the fire. But from all accounts, things are going well, and it's kind of like getting cattle started on feed. You got to get them started slow and start working them up, and it sounds like they're getting them going pretty good. But just 361,000 so far for the week. That's 20,000 more than last week, but you remember we had some shutdowns due to weather and things like that, and just 1,000 more than the same week a year ago. What is going on here middle of the week? Western Video Market had their big video sale there in Reno, Nevada. Pulled out a couple of hot quotes out of there. Holiday Ranch, Lakeview, Oregon, 112 head of 440-pound weaned steer calves there, all black, for immediate delivery right there. Backgrounded on just hay, not supplementally fed there, and you can kind of look at those cattle and tell they're not carrying much flesh. But $222.50. That's $2 a pound and $22.50. We haven't seen prices like that in quite a while. I talked quite a bit about those Y-Bell cows that were for sale. They were selling off the older end of their herd, the 6 years old and up, selling those out of Bend, Oregon there, and I was able to go see that place and see the facility, see the cows. Really enjoyed that there a couple of weeks ago when I was out in Oregon. They did indeed sell those bred cows on there. I'll give you a rundown. The 6-year-olds, there was like 8 loads of them. 248 head of them, and they averaged them around 1,600 pounds. And from when I was looking at them, I sure thought they'd push down that hard. But 6-year-olds, all those bred cows there at $1,550 a round. On the 7-year-olds, they had like 217 head of those, and figured those weighing about 1,500 pounds. And all of those brought $1,375 a head. And then your older ones, your 8 to 10-year-olds, and there wasn't even 200 head of them. That goes to show you how hard they've been culling those, because they've already peeled a lot of those older cows off, even though they were still in really good shape. But 8 to 10-year-olds bring from $1,175 to $12.50, and that's still a pretty good sale there. And that is for immediate delivery also. Remember I told you yesterday that Rick Machado was selling some of his horses at the tail end of that Western Video Market sale. Watched them sell 11 head of the coming 2-year-olds. So, they haven't won any national finals performances as of yet, or anything like that. But awfully good horses there with a lot of color to them. But they averaged 62 1/4 head there. So pretty good price there. Of course, you know, there was some that brought more and some that brought less, but on the average, well over $6,000 a head. That's pretty good for a coming 2-year-old horse. All right, let's talk about your feeder cattle market for middle of the week here on Wednesday. Real-time index on DV auction 144.28, down 46 cents. So we're seeing some weakness right here. Why are we seeing the weakness? We're just exhausted with all these calves, guys, and you think, and I've told you that the numbers are going to get back in our favor. We've got to at least get to spring, because you know we've got a big disparage. There's not nearly enough fall calvers, so we'll be short of calves in the spring. And then with the liquidation that we've done, the big numbers of cows that we've slaughtered, the big numbers of heifers that we've fed and slaughtered, we're going to get the numbers back in our favor. But for this fall, it wasn't yet that way, and a lot of calves to choke. We've choked a lot of them. The pastures are not nearly as good for your fall grazing as what we had hoped they would be. Still got some stockpile grass and things. Now out west, you know, these storms have started out there. California has gotten a lot of rain here in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And they're actually thinking they're going to get green grass here right in the dead of the winter. But I can't see that. But the locals out there say it sure enough will come when they get the right kind of days and the sunshine. So there's a lot of grazing demand. That tells you why those Holiday Ranch steer calves that were weaned bring 220, 250. There'd have to be some cheap grazing out there, and I guess there is. But your wheat pasture is just not nearly as good as what we thought. It's kind of been a bust. There has been a little bit of moisture here and there, but you know, for the moisture that we've had, even it ain't as good as what you'd think it would be. And like I said earlier, if you see some cattle out on wheat, there's really no wheat there. The only time you see any wheat is just a field that they're irrigating and don't have any cattle on. But your feedlots are also full of calves. We just had so many of them moving, and then we had a lot of them moving just a little bit later because of the fire in Holcomb. There we had a big market interruption there for about a month, and people were just really unsure about taking their cattle to the sale, so they kept them at home. They had enough grazing, the pasture conditions were good enough to allow them to keep them at home. Then we were forced to choke all of them at one time. And so that's the reason that we're seeing kind of this slump, even though our demand is outstanding pretty much at every level. It's just hard to find more places to send those big calves because guys already have so many of them. And they haven't worked. For a backgrounder, they haven't worked very good the last 2 or 3 years, so they can't get overly excited about, you know, just betting the whole farm on the deal. But your big sales on Wednesday, of course, OKC West, El Reno, Oklahoma, 9,600 head for the 2-day sale. Pretty evenly split between the calves on Tuesday and the feeders on Wednesday. Didn't have a sale last week, of course, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, but compared to 2 weeks ago, your feeders were mostly steady. That's saying the few real yearlings that they had on hand and the long time weaned calves that had a short yearling look to them, those sold mostly steady. Now, on the Federal State Market Report, they were hinting around that the big calves were hard to sell and the shorter weaned calves. They didn't really say how much, but you know, talking to other people, and they would agree that your bigger calves, bigger feeding calves that got to go to feed, they were kind of a hard sell. Now, your lighter calves, your stocker type calves, and especially your peewees, $2 to $6 higher, both steers and heifers, with spots as much as $12 higher on those real lightweights. But pretty good deal there. John Cooper did send me a note on one load of pretty fancy steers there, but they had an August wean on them. Now, chronologically, they would still be calves, but they had an August wean on them. It takes a lot more. It has a lot more to do with how long it's been since they've seen their mamas and if they've been turned back out or not. And these had been both. But 60 head of 750-pound steers with an August wean on them, $157.50. That is a big price. Let's look at some other places. How about Hardin County Stockyards out in Savannah, Tennessee? talked with Debbie a couple of times. She was having a little bit of trouble with her National Beef Wire TV, so we just sent her a new stick, and she's going to get that TV mounted up and just take care of that problem so she won't have problems logging on to that anymore. But Hardin County Stockyards, that's Harry Floyd's sale out there in Sons, and they sell strings of cattle. You might not think so, kind of on that Alabama-Tennessee line. You wouldn't think they'd sell loads of cattle. Look at all these loads of cattle that they sold. These are just steers and big strings of steers that they sold in Savannah, Tennessee, right through the ring there. And they weighed from 600 to 800 pounds. No, they don't bring western Nebraska prices, but you got a lot of freight on them. Just got to figure what you're dealing with, but still pretty respectable there. 600 to 800 pound steers from 133 and a half up to almost 150 at 149.75. Biggest quote on yearlings I saw was out of Stockman's Livestock there in Yankton, South Dakota. 60 head of 946 pound steers. Don't see anything like that around much right now. 946 pound steers bring 150 and a quarter. Wow. But Bassett, Nebraska had a sale on Wednesday, so we got to talk about them. And most of the calves they're getting now are weaned. And you're getting strings, a 1-iron, Reputation, western Nebraska sandhill calves that are weaned now. Now you're talking about some value there. How about 74 head of 512 pound steers there? 191.75. And then a bigger string of 600 pounders, 192 head of 600 pound smooth steers, 175.75. That's your feeder flash for Thursday.